as I said, I'm going to talk to you about South Africa and the international condemnation. I'm just looking at my lips if I'm being for real right now. I might also do South Africa A to Z. South Africa apartheid A to Z. Not South Africa itself. But without further ado, let's start with the international condemnation. Well, we're starting good old 1959. Apartheid started in 1948, officially. But in 1959, that's when the boycotting movement began in the UK. You would see throughout this whole timeline that the UK has been very much a front driver in the international movement. They really did do a lot in international movement. Now, let's not get mixed up the UK, the people, and the UK, the government. Because the government fluctuated in its support. I.e., not until 1980, where Thatcher was like, actually, I think we should boycott them. Well, صباح الخير. I don't know what else to say. Well, good morning. They've been saying that actually since 1959, where the boycott movement started to gain traction. This was really supported by newspapers like The Guardian and The Observer, more left-wing, left-leaning. And there was a lot of campaigns to encourage consumers to boycott from South African products like sherry and oranges, South African oranges. Instead, look into Moroccan oranges. We have some pretty good oranges. 1960. The anti-apartheid movement was founded officially in London. That's LA. And it was supported by many figures, actually a lot of religious figures, like Trevor Huddleston and Ambrose Reeves. The British Prime Minister at the time, Harold Macmillan, he had the Wind of Change speech, which he had in South Africa. In this speech, he was saying, like, it's inevitable that African countries were going to gain independence and trust. Verwood was pissed. He was like, why the flip are you coming in this apartheid country and saying crap like that? He was mad. But the reason why Harold said that was because the USSR was gaining more traction and he wanted the African countries to stay on the capitalist side. So it was selfish in that extent. Verwood was scared that black South Africans are going to think, hello, everybody else is getting independence. Why don't we do a little tweak of our own? And Verwood couldn't stand for that. This was really significant because Britain also had a lot of economic ties with South Africa. Around 2/3 of FDI, foreign direct investment, in South Africa was British, and also around 1/3 of South African trade was with Britain. So South Africa did actually depend on Britain a lot. But then, Sharpeville Massacre did happen on the 21st of March. The UN Security Council passed a resolution to condemn apartheid as a result of the massacre, and also Britain and France abstained from that. So it was like, oh, okay. Oh, we see where the loyalty lies. Again, along this whole time period, as long as there was the Cold War, Western countries treaded waters when it came to condemning apartheid, because they were like, so we could do that, but also we need South Africa because Cold War is getting a bit heated. And South Africa was a large capitalist country in Africa, so they needed that tie to Africa, to South Africa. So yeah, you'll be seeing that, how they're trying to stay neutral. Next, Oliver Tambo went into exile also. Oh yeah, if I'm smelling this, it's not because it has coke or anything. I don't do drugs. I don't, and you shouldn't either. Okay? I'm only smelling this because it smells of a really distinctive perfume, and my study hack is that I smell this distinctive perfume and I smell it again when I'm doing the exam. All the information is going to come into me. Next. Oliver Tambo went into exile in London. He addressed the UN in New York multiple times, and also the UN called for the release of political prisoners. Tambo also secured military funding from the USSR, and also humanitarian and non-military funding and support from Sweden. 1963. The UN established the UN Special Committee Against Apartheid, and also there were AAM in the US, Canada, and Netherlands. FIFA also excluded South Africa from international football. There was the Organization of African Unity, which created the Liberation Fund to support anti-colonial and anti-apartheid movements. 1964, South Africa was excluded from the Olympic Games, so we're seeing a lot of sporting boycotts now. And Britain imposed an arms embargo on South Africa. Into the mid-60s, we can't say that Britain actually put their foot down, because we can see now British interest, such as through having their foreign companies continuing to set up and invest to South Africa, like Barclays, but also this is for most of the Western world, like Volkswagen, Coca-Cola. Also, foreign powers really like South Africa because they had gold, uranium, and coal. Uranium, get some physics knowledge, I think it's physics. Uranium is needed for nuclear power. Nukes. Because everybody's building nukes right now. Cold War. Arms race. And Japan is becoming a more important trading partner with South Africa as they make and impose more car factories in South Africa. 1968, the president of Zambia actually tells the ANC to move their bases because MK was actually based in Zambia until now. And law with Basil de Oliveira. Let me tell you, Basil de Oliveira, he's not white. He was exiled from South Africa. He's not white. If you didn't catch it the first time. Anyway, there's a cricket tour happening, and the British team is going to South Africa for this cricket tour. Basil de Oliveira, he's a cricket player for the British team. So we have an Upsy Daisy. He's one of the main British players for the cricket team. But they're going to South Africa. In South Africa, he's exiled from, and there's apartheid, and he's not white. That time. Anyway, they say, oh, Basil, you're not gonna be able to be on our team for the tour. And people heard about that, outcry. People got pissed. 20,000 letters of support for Basil. So, the cricket team was like, okay, whatever, Basil, you're on again. But hey, Worcester hears about this. He was like, not on my turf, not on my land, which is actually really not in their land. That's the funny thing. Anyways, how can someone be illegal on stolen land? Anyway, so Worcester's like, they're not coming to flip. So the tour gets cancelled, and there was just a more increased opposition for apartheid. 1969, there was the Morogoro Conference in Tanzania. Anyway, and changed the ANC structure in exile as it re-legitimized Tambo's leadership, but also made it way more interracial than it was, and also excluded any radical members, i.e. Tennyson Muktwabi. 1970, there was the Stop 70 tour, again, more controversial in the sporting ground, where South Africa rugby and cricket tours were happening in Britain and Ireland. So now it's like South Africa's turn to go to Britain and Ireland. However, once people heard about that, mass demonstration, they were like, hell no, not on my turf. Anyway, the cricket tour was cancelled, and South Africa was actually expelled from the international test for cricket. More on the 70s, there was this idea of constructive engagement. As you can see, more proof of Western powers play the middle ground. So they did constructive engagement, which follows that we're not gonna like leave South Africa cold turkey, because obviously that's going to affect badly the black South Africans, and we don't want to do that. We do see how the economic growth is disproportionately helping the white people, and it's actually funding apartheid, but we don't want to take out that little bit of money that's actually going to black people. So we're going to constructively engage, whatever that means. Anyway, so that's what they did in the UK. And Nixon, 1972, there was the World Council of Churches. They sold all their holdings of South African companies. Now that's how you oppose apartheid. But 1973, there's also the Halt All Racist Tours, which was formed, which is quite literally self-explanatory. And Status was launched, which did a lot of campaigns for political prisoners, such as obviously Nelson Mandela. He got a lot of traction also at that time because he was imprisoned. They found that the imprisoned society in 1974. Worcester toured West Africa to move away from being diplomatically isolated, as he was insanely isolated as a country. And he met with the leaders of Ivory Coast and Liberia. 1975, Angola gained independence, and they were ruled under a Marxist group called the MPLA. It doesn't go good. It does not go good for Angola. And there's just more Cold War tensions, given that the Cuban Missile Crisis happened just a few years earlier. 1976, Soweto Uprising. There was a crazy demonstration in London, 6,000 protesters, because Soweto, not good. Hector Peterson, worldwide. But 77, there was the Glen Eagles Agreement, which, more sporting boycotts, honestly. Onto the 80s, Dolly Parton and whatnot. I don't know if Dolly Parton's the 80s. The UN called for a comprehensive cultural and economic boycott of South Africa, as they did for like the 5th time in a row. There's also the Southern African Development Coordination Conference that was launched, trying to make the other Southern African countries less dependent on South Africa. But this hashtag failed because South Africa did indeed have so much control over the regional ports and roads. 82. There was a non-aggression pact with Lesotho, and Lesotho agreed to stop hosting ANC bases. 1984, there was the Nkomati Accord with Mozambique, which meant that there would be no more military action in Mozambique. Also, they couldn't shelter ANC members. 85, Chase Manhattan, as well as other banks, stopped and agreed to not renew their loans for South Africa. The round did not do too well. It did indeed collapse. Also, a group of South African businessmen met with the ANC. So it's not looking good for the National Party. 86, the US Congress passed the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act, which imposed economic sanctions, banned imports of South African goods, and prohibited any arms sales to South Africa. 88, foreign troops are finally withdrew from Angola, and Nelson Mandela is 70 years old, which his birthday was broadcasted globally from Wembley. 89, SWAPO won the free elections in Namibia, and leaders such as Reagan and Thatcher finally do something by urging South Africa to negotiate. And into the 90s, South Africa's #3. I think it's 94. But anyway, 1990, Mandela released, because he was in prison this whole time. From 63, 64, he was in Robben Island and then he was moved. But the point is, he's in prison this whole time. Mandela goes to London, talks to Thatcher, and there's a concert for him which reaches an audience of 500 million people worldwide. And that's what was happening internationally while apartheid was going on. Next, we're going to talk about apartheid. Guys, do you want to guess what exam I have tomorrow? Also, my poster went, and I literally just noticed, and I don't know for how long it went. Anyway, okay,